I've been driving trucks since I was 22. Started off running small routes up and down the East Coast, then slowly moved into long hauls. Most nights on the road are uneventful. Just a lot of darkness, engine noise, and the occasional roadside diner coffee to keep me awake. I've seen wrecks, drunk drivers, and weird stuff at truck stops. But one night in Nebraska made me rethink everything I thought I knew about being on the road. This was about 3 years ago. I was hauling a load of construction equipment from Kansas City up to Rapid City. It was late September, one of those weeks where the weather couldn't decide what it wanted to be. I left late afternoon and planned to stop halfway for a nap in the cab before pushing through to South Dakota. My rig was in good shape, trailer was sealed, everything checked out. The first leg of the drive was fine. A little boring, long stretches of open highway, a few scattered lights in the distance that were probably farmhouses. Once the sun dipped below the horizon, it got dark fast. Nebraska doesn't have a lot of cities. Out there it's just 2-lane highways, cornfields, wind, and flatlands stretching into black nothing. Around 11 p.m., I was about 30 miles south of a small town called Alliance. I was getting tired, but I figured I'd drive a bit more before pulling over. The road was empty, hadn't seen another car for at least half an hour. The only light came from my high beams and the occasional reflective road sign. I was sipping lukewarm coffee from my thermos when I noticed something ahead, off to the right side of the road. First, I thought it was a deer, but as I got closer, it looked like a vehicle. A small pickup truck parked on the gravel shoulder, tilted a bit like the right wheels were in the ditch. Hazard lights weren't on. No lights at all, actually. I slowed down out of instinct, scanning the area. The truck looked old, maybe a late 80s model, rust along the sides, flat rear tire. Driver's door was wide open. I didn't see anyone. I wasn't about to stop. I've heard too many stories from other drivers about staged breakdowns used to lure people in. Still, I slowed just enough to get a better look as I passed. No one inside, no movement, no flashlight beams, no phone lights, nothing. Just the truck and the cold wind pushing against my trailer. I kept driving, shaking it off. But 10 minutes later, I saw something else. It was another vehicle. This time a sedan, also off to the right. Same thing, dark, hazards off, no interior lights. This one had both front doors open. Again, no one in sight. And the weirdest part was this one also had a flat tire. Front right side. I slowed down again, squinting into the darkness. It didn't look like a crash. No broken glass, no skid marks, no debris. Just abandoned. At this point, I was wide awake. Every nerve in my body was on edge. It's not unusual to see a car on the side of the road. But two vehicles, same side, similar condition, same type of tire damage, that close together? In the middle of nowhere, something felt wrong. I kept going. My hands were tight on the wheel. I turned off the radio and just listened to the sound of the tires on the road and the low hum of the engine. The wind outside had picked up. It made that high-pitched whistle as it slipped through the edges of the cab windows. About 5 minutes later, I saw movement. This time it wasn't a vehicle. It was a person. They were standing on the left side of the road, facing the highway, right near the edge of the ditch. No flashlight, no reflective gear, just standing there in the dark. I couldn't see their face clearly, but I caught a glimpse of something pale, skin maybe. They didn't move when my headlights hit them. Didn't flinch, didn't wave, didn't step back. Just stood there. I swerved slightly to the right, instinctively trying to give them space, even though they weren't in the road. I glanced in the rearview mirror as I passed. Nothing, just darkness. My trailer rattled from a gust of wind and the sound jolted me. I looked ahead and kept my foot on the gas. I was done with this stretch. I checked the GPS. The next truck stop was still 20 miles out. I told myself to keep going. Don't stop, don't overthink it. Then I saw the third vehicle. It was a white panel van. Rear doors open. No lights, no people. Left side flat tire this time. Something was off with the way it was parked. Angled across part of the shoulder, like it had just come to a stop mid-turn. There were marks in the gravel. Not quite tire tracks, more like something had been dragged. I didn't slow down this time. I sped up. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to look closer. I was doing almost 80 in a 65 by now, just trying to get to the damn truck stop. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone on the road anymore. My mirrors showed nothing. The CB radio was dead quiet. Then, about 2 miles from the truck stop, I saw headlights behind me. Small, maybe a sedan. I hadn't seen a car in almost an hour. I watched it for a while in the mirror. It stayed behind me maybe 300 feet back. Not tailgating, not flashing lights, just there. At first I thought it was a relief. Someone else out here, maybe I was overthinking everything. But then I realized this car had its lights on, but no reflection showed on the road. No shine, no bounce, like it wasn't actually there. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes. When I looked again, the lights were gone. When I finally pulled into the truck stop, I parked way in the back, near the fence. I shut off the engine and just sat there in the cab for a while, heart pounding. I didn't get out. I didn't go inside. I didn't even check the trailer. I stayed awake until sunrise, windows cracked, doors locked. When the sun came up, everything looked normal. Other drivers were fueling up, grabbing breakfast, talking on phones. I walked around my rig. Everything looked fine. No damage, no tampering. I walked over to another driver, someone I'd seen a few times before at different stops. I asked if he came through the same highway stretch during the night. He shook his head, said he came in from a different route. I didn't bring up what I saw. Later, I checked the route again on my map. No reports of accidents, no stalled vehicles logged, no police reports, nothing. But I know what I saw. Those weren't wrecks. Those weren't ghost stories or hallucinations. That was real. Those vehicles were real. That person standing there was real. But whatever happened on that road, I don't think I was supposed to see it. After that trip, I changed my routing preferences to avoid that stretch of highway. I've been driving a long time, and I've never seen anything like that again. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm out on a dark road with no lights around, I still think about it. I keep one hand close to the cab light switch. I watch the mirrors a little too often, and I never, ever stop for broken down vehicles at night anymore. I used to drive the same route every week, from Edinburgh down to London and back again. It was a long haul, 8 to 10 hours depending on traffic, but I got used to the routine. I'd usually leave just before sunrise, stop at the same service stations for fuel and a quick bite, listen to the radio or an audiobook to keep myself alert. You get into a rhythm after a while. The roads almost become part of you. It's boring work sometimes, but every now and then, something sticks with you, something you can't explain. This one drive years ago still creeps into my thoughts when I'm driving late at night. It was early autumn, I remember that clearly. The trees were starting to turn orange, but the days were still long enough that I had daylight for most of the journey. I had a full trailer, electronics mostly, and I was making good time on the M1. Traffic wasn't bad, the weather was decent, and I'd already cleared the A720 and gotten into the flow of things. Around mid-morning, maybe 3 hours into the drive, I noticed a small silver car pull up beside me on the right. It wasn't anything unusual. Cars pass you all the time. But something about the woman in the passenger seat caught my eye. She had her hair tied in a tight bun, like that head teacher from Matilda, what's her name? Miss Trunchbull. That's how I've always described it since. The bun was dead tight, like it had been wound up and pinned with military precision. But that wasn't what bothered me. It was her face. She was staring straight at me, not like a casual glance or even an annoyed driver kind of look. She was wide-eyed, pale and tense, like something was horribly wrong. Her eyes were locked onto mine and her mouth was slightly open. It looked like she was trying to say something but couldn't. I only saw her for a few seconds before the car took the next exit and disappeared. The driver, a middle-aged man with dark hair and sunglasses, didn't look at me at all. I kept driving. At first, I just brushed it off. I've seen couples arguing in cars before. Maybe it was just a bad fight. Maybe she wanted help and didn't know how to ask. Maybe she was just staring off into space and happened to look at me. But the look in her eyes, it wasn't blank or dazed. It was sharp, intense. It was like she was trying to communicate something she couldn't say out loud. I kept going for another 30 or 40 minutes. The road was mostly clear and I was cruising comfortably when another car pulled up beside me. A different car this time, blue this time, a hatchback. But my stomach dropped the moment I saw her. Same woman, same bun, same expression. Only the driver was different, a younger guy, maybe in his 20s with a beard. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I stared for a moment, trying to make sense of it, but the woman didn't change her expression. She kept looking right at me, eyes wide and pleading. It made no sense. Different car, different driver, same woman. Before I could react, they sped up and vanished down the road. That's when I started to get genuinely nervous. I told myself I'd stop at the next services and report it. Even if it was a misunderstanding, better safe than sorry. But the thing is, by the time I pulled into the next service station, maybe 15 minutes later, the car was gone. No sign of it. I couldn't even remember the plates. I stood there at the pumps for a minute trying to calm down. Thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? I saw the same woman in 2 different cars making weird faces at me. It didn't feel like enough. I convinced myself it was some weird prank or coincidence and got back on the road. I didn't see her again for a long time. Nearly 4 hours passed. I was getting closer to London. Tired now, just wanting to finish the drive. The traffic had picked up and I was more focused on keeping the lane and not getting cut off. It was just before dusk. That weird time when everything starts to look shadowy and your eyes play tricks on you. Then I saw it again. Another car, this time a dark green sedan, pulled up beside me. And she was there. Same exact woman. Same bun. Same pale, terrified face. Except this time, she wasn't just staring. She was screaming. I couldn't hear her, obviously, but her mouth was wide open, her face contorted. She was slapping the window with her hands, pounding on the glass and shouting something I couldn't make out. The driver, a bald man in a red jumper, kept his face forward like nothing was happening. I damn near lost control of the lorry. I pulled into the lobby on instinct, heart racing, and grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking as I dialed the police. I told them exactly what I'd seen. 3 different cars, same woman, same weird expression, now screaming. I didn't have license plates, just vague descriptions. I thought they'd brush me off, but they didn't. The woman on the line said, very calmly, that I wasn't the first person to call that evening. They'd received 3 other reports about a woman matching that description being seen in multiple vehicles along the M1 and M25 corridors. Same kind of behavior. No one had managed to get a plate. No one had seen the cars stop. She said they were looking into it. That was it. I sat in that lobby for a good 30 minutes before getting back on the road. I kept my eyes peeled the rest of the way. Every car that passed, every face that looked even slightly familiar, I watched them like a hawk. But I didn't see her again. I got to the depot just after 10 that night, offloaded my trailer, parked up, and sat in the cab for a long while before heading home. I didn't sleep well for days after that. I kept checking the news, looking online, trying to find something. Anything about a missing person, a kidnapping, a carjacking. Nothing came up. Not a single story that matched. I even tried local London news outlets, but it was like it never happened. Eventually, I stopped looking. Life carried on. The route stayed the same. But every now and then, especially if I'm driving that same stretch of motorway just as the sun's going down, I catch myself watching the cars beside me a little more closely than I used to. I don't know what I saw that day. Maybe it was some bizarre coincidence. Maybe it was a planned prank, some social experiment thing gone too far. Maybe it was something darker, something the police looked into quietly and never made public. I'll never know. But that woman's face, locked in terror, staring at me like I was her last hope, I'll never forget it. It happened about 2 years ago, middle of summer, somewhere outside of Oklahoma City. I was parked at a truck stop, not one of the big-name ones, just one of those small, beat-up ones with a couple fuel islands, a diner attached, and maybe 10 parking spots out back. I'd gotten there around sunset, long day of driving, and I planned to grab a burger, maybe a shower if the water pressure wasn't total crap, and crash early. My next delivery wasn't till late the next afternoon, so I wasn't in a rush. It was hot, that sticky, stale kind of heat that doesn't let up even after the sun goes down. The kind where you step out of your cab and you're already sweating before you hit the pavement. I'd gotten my food, burger, fries, big soda, and climbed back into the cab to eat with the curtain halfway shut to block the sun that was still bleeding through the driver's side window. After I finished eating, I saw a guy walking through the lot. Looked homeless, maybe late 40s or early 50s. Hard to tell with all the dirt on his face and his tangled beard. He had this dark green army jacket on, even though it was nearly 90 degrees out. The kind of guy you see at these stops sometimes, usually asking for a few bucks, maybe a cigarette. He wasn't the first, and I'm sure as hell he won't be the last. He came up to my window, tapped with 2 fingers. I rolled it down just a little, enough to hear him, but not enough to give him an opening. He asked if I could spare a few bucks for food. I told him I didn't carry cash, which was mostly true, and then offered him a bag of hot Cheetos I hadn't opened. He looked at it, scrunched his face, said something about how that would tear up his stomach. But he just told me he was eating out of the garbage, so I didn't really know what to say to that. I told him that was all I had, slid the window back up, and shut the curtain fully. Figured he'd move on like they usually do. Not even 30 seconds later, I heard it. A bang. Not soft. A solid, open hand smack right on the back door of the trailer. Then another one. And another. He started yelling. Something about how I shut the door in his face. How I didn't respect him. How he'd never do that to another man. I sat there in silence, heart picking up a little. I reached over and killed the dome lights so it looked dark inside. I didn't want him to see any movement. He kept yelling, fists pounding the trailer. I could feel it shake a bit with each hit. Then he started pacing. I could hear the gravel crunching under his boots as he walked around the trailer, muttering to himself, yelling random things. Most of it didn't make sense. I grabbed my flashlight and unhooked the little latch on the side curtain, just enough to peek out. He was at the back of the trailer now, looking up at it, waving his arms like he was arguing with it, like the metal had talked back to him. Then he grabbed a chunk of gravel and chucked it at the cab, bounced off the driver's side mirror with a sharp crack. That's when I slipped my hand into the center console and pulled out the .40 I keep holstered in there. I don't usually wear it on me when I sleep, but that night I clipped it to my belt. Just felt like one of those nights where it might matter. I didn't go out there, didn't open the window or say a word. I just sat there, holding the gun low in my lap, breathing slow and quiet, waiting for him to get bored or tired or something. Eventually, the banging stopped. A minute passed, then 2. I heard something hit the ground, coins, a handful of change. Then footsteps walking off, slow at first, then picking up speed until I couldn't hear them anymore. I didn't move for another 10 minutes, just sat there listening. Every creak of the trailer, every gust of wind through the nearby weeds sounded louder than it should have. But nothing else happened. Eventually, I cracked the curtain open again. Lot was still. The old diner was dark now. One semi had its engine idling 2 spots over, but I didn't see anyone outside. I stayed up for a while, didn't even try to sleep. I just kept my boots on, back against the bunk wall, gun still on my hip. Around 3 a.m., I finally dozed off, light sleep, but enough to get me through. In the morning, the sun came up angry and bright, and I stepped out to check the trailer. Load bars, chains, spare tire, all still there. Nothing stolen. No scratches, no slashed tires, no busted locks. I walked to the back where he'd been banging. Just some smudged handprints and a few small dents that weren't there before. I picked up the change he'd dropped. Maybe $1.50 in nickels and dimes. I left it on the pavement. Didn't see him that day. But since then, I've spotted him a few times at different stops. Once in Amarillo, leaning against a dumpster, staring at the ground. Another time in Tulsa, walking along the frontage road near an abandoned gas station. He didn't recognize me, or if he did, he didn't let on. Just kept moving. After that night, I made a few changes. Started wearing the gun on my hip when I park, not just keeping it in the console. I locked the doors the second I shut them. I started picking better lit stops, even if I have to park further out or pay a fee. I check my surroundings before I even step out of the cab. Doesn't matter if it's noon or midnight. It wasn't the craziest thing that's ever happened to me on the road, but it's the one that stuck the hardest. Not because it was violent or because anything really bad happened, but because of how fast it all turned. 1 second, I'm offering a guy a bag of chips. The next, he's banging on my truck like he wants to rip the doors off. No warning, no buildup, just rage out of nowhere. Makes you realize how thin the line is sometimes, how quick something can flip. Out here, most nights are boring. Just you, the road, and the hum of the engine. But every now and then, something happens that makes you sit up and remember that you're alone. That help is a phone call and 20 minutes away, if you're lucky. That night was one of those reminders, and I don't forget reminders like that. I was somewhere in Wisconsin, I think. Could have been Minnesota, but I'm pretty sure it was Wisconsin. It was the middle of the night, maybe just before 4 in the morning. I was driving down this 2-lane road, way out between a couple of small towns. The kind of area where there's not much more than fields, patches of woods, and some old barns you pass every few miles. The road was dead quiet. I don't remember seeing another vehicle for quite a while. I had my window cracked just a little, enough to get some of the cool air coming in to help keep me awake. And I had some old country music playing low on the radio just to fill the silence. That's when I saw a set of headlights coming up behind me fast. It was a minivan. No markings or anything, just one of those gray or light blue ones that kind of blends into everything. Came flying past me like I was parked. Must have been doing 80 or more. I remember thinking it was kind of odd, that time of night and out in the middle of nowhere. But people drive crazy sometimes, so I didn't think too much about it. Maybe 4 minutes after that, I saw something ahead in my lane. It was just a dark shape at first, and I eased off the gas a little, started watching it close. As I got closer, I realized it was a vehicle. No lights, just kind of sitting there in my lane, and smoke was drifting up around it. I hit the brakes hard and slowed all the way down until I came to a stop behind it. It was the same damn minivan that had passed me just minutes ago. It had hit something head-on. The front end was smashed to hell, and one of the wheels looked like it had come off entirely. The other car, looked like a small sedan, was off to the side a bit but still half in the lane. Both vehicles were mangled up bad. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 right away. I told the dispatcher what road I was on and gave them the nearest mile marker I remembered passing. I stayed in the truck just long enough to finish the call. Then I grabbed a flashlight and got out. The air smelled like hot antifreeze and oil, mixed with something that reminded me of burnt rubber. There was glass all over the road and bits of plastic and metal scattered everywhere. My boots crunched over it as I walked toward the wreck. I went to the van first. The windshield was shattered and spiderwebbed, and I couldn't see much through it. I tried the driver's side door, but it was jammed tight. I walked around and shined the light through the passenger window. The driver was slumped forward, both hands hanging down at his sides. Blood was everywhere, on the dashboard, on his face, pooled in his lap. His head was cocked back at a weird angle like his neck had broken on impact. I didn't touch anything, just looked. I walked over to the other car, the little sedan. The front of it was crushed inward almost to the windshield. The woman driving it looked older, maybe mid-60s, hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her face was pale. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't moving. Her mouth was slightly open, and there was a thin line of blood that had run down from her nose and dried along her cheek. I checked her neck for a pulse just to be sure, but there was nothing. She was gone too. The whole scene felt like it had just happened. There was still heat rising off both engines, and the smoke hadn't cleared yet. The road was completely silent except for the ticking sound of cooling metal and the occasional hiss from one of the engines. I stood there for maybe another minute or two before I saw the first set of red and blue lights in the distance. Soon after, a few sheriff's cars and a local EMT unit pulled up, followed by a fire truck. They all rushed out and took over the scene. One of the officers waved me back toward my truck, so I went and waited there. After a while, one of them came over and asked me a few questions. When I found the crash, what direction I was coming from, if I'd seen it happen. I told them exactly what I saw, and they said both drivers were already gone by the time they got there. Nothing anyone could have done. They had me stick around a while just in case they needed more details. Eventually, they let me go. I eased my truck past the wreck and kept on down that quiet road. I didn't see another car for the next hour. Just a lot of empty fields and dark woods. That drive stuck with me for a long time. Still does. I think about how fast that van flew past me. 3 minutes later, it was twisted metal and broken glass. Just like that. That wasn't the only strange moment I've had out on the road. Another time, it was middle of the day, hot as hell, somewhere out on an interstate in Texas. Might have been I-10 or maybe 20. The sky was wide open, no clouds at all, just that relentless sun baking down. I'd been driving a few hours already, hauling a load of freight northbound. Nothing special, just a routine haul. I was cruising along when I noticed something on top of one of those big green exit signs. At first, I thought it was maybe a bird of some kind, but it wasn't moving. As I got closer, I saw it was an owl, just sitting there, still as a statue, perched right on top of that sign in the middle of the day. I'd never seen an owl before, not in the wild, and certainly not just chilling in broad daylight next to a freeway. I stared at it as I approached. It didn't budge. Then, just as I got right up to the sign, the damn thing spread its wings and launched straight into the air, right into the path of my truck. There was this loud thump, and then feathers exploded in every direction. My mirrors filled with feathers blowing out around both sides of the cab. I didn't swerve or anything, but the impact startled me. For a second, I thought maybe it was still alive, but after a quick glance in the rearview, I saw it tumbling along the shoulder behind me. Thing flew right into the airfoil on top of the trailer and never had a chance. Don't know why it did that. Maybe it got confused, maybe it panicked, or maybe it was just tired of life. Who knows? All I know is it didn't make it. That drive stuck with me too. You don't expect to see an owl in the middle of the day, and you sure as hell don't expect it to fly directly into your truck. Things happen out here. Little moments like that just pile up in your memory. One of my regular runs back then was from Phoenix, Arizona up into Wisconsin. Always struck me as strange. I'd be hauling these massive barrels of cheese, stacked and sealed and labeled for distribution, headed into a state that's famous for making cheese. Wisconsin importing cheese from Arizona. What the hell is that about? Never made sense to me. I used to joke to myself about it. Like maybe Wisconsin was outsourcing their cheese to Arizona for tax reasons, or maybe it was some weird supply chain quirk. All I know is I'd haul that cheese all the way up through the plains, through Kansas, Nebraska, sometimes straight through Missouri or Iowa, and drop it off just outside Madison or Milwaukee. It was good money and a quiet route, mostly. But those long stretches of highway do strange things to your mind. Sometimes you start thinking about all the little moments, crashes, birds, deliveries that make no damn sense, and you realize just how much of the country you've seen and how little control you have over anything out here. All you can do is keep your wheels turning and your eyes open, because out on the road, the weirdest things don't always make a sound. They just show up, uninvited, and stay with you. I still drive, though not as much as I used to. Those memories come back now and then, especially on quiet nights. That van wreck, the owl, the cheese runs. I never asked for any of it. I was just doing my job, but I remember every detail. I was born and raised in Mombasa, Kenya, and in the 1980s I was a long-haul truck driver. I used to take goods across East Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, sometimes even Zaire. I'd carry everything from grain to fuel drums, cement to food items. Back then, the roads were bad, the pay wasn't great, and the borders were unpredictable. But it was honest work, and I loved being on the road, far from the heat of the coastal city, the endless roar of the port. I liked the quiet of the countryside, the strange towns, the scent of eucalyptus and dry dust, the sound of frogs and crickets at night when I parked my truck to sleep. In the early 1990s, I got a job hauling construction materials from Kampala to Bujumbura. That meant crossing Rwanda. I didn't think much of it at the time. I had driven that route many times before. The job was routine. Drive into Uganda, spend a night in Kampala, then cross over into Rwanda at Gatuna and make my way down through Kigali, heading toward the southwestern border. Back then, I'd heard some chatter, just whispers on the road, other drivers saying things were heating up in Rwanda, tribal tensions, local unrest, but we always heard things like that. East Africa was a loud place, full of problems. You learned not to panic every time you heard rumors. The day I entered Rwanda, it was quiet. Too quiet, maybe, now that I think back on it. I didn't see the usual villagers along the road. No kids chasing tires, no women walking with baskets on their heads. Even the cows were gone. Felt strange, but not dangerous. I had my permit papers, my ID, my fuel and water, and a well-running truck. I thought I'd be in and out of the country in 2 days. I was somewhere between Byumba and Kigali when I hit a checkpoint. It wasn't one of the regular border posts with uniforms and signs. This one was rough. Just a makeshift barricade of tires and branches with 5 or 6 men standing around holding rifles and machetes. I slowed down, honked twice, and rolled my window down, like we always did. They didn't say a word. One of them walked to my door, opened it, and yanked me out. I didn't even have time to grab my papers. Another man climbed into the truck and drove it off to the side of the road. They shoved me into the dirt and tied my hands behind my back. I tried telling them I was Kenyan, that I wasn't from Rwanda, but they didn't seem to understand or care. They just kept talking to each other in Kinyarwanda. They marched me off the road into the bush, maybe half a kilometer into the trees, and there, behind some thorny scrub, was a wire cage. I swear, it looked like something you'd keep livestock in, but it was packed with people. At least 20 of them, maybe more, all sitting on the ground, knees to their chests, silent. When they pushed me in, no one looked up. I remember the smell: sweat, blood, fear, and something worse, death. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know why they had taken me, why I was in that cage. That first night, they came with torches. About 4 or 5 men with machetes. They unlocked the cage and pulled out 5 people. I watched them beg, struggle, cry. It didn't matter. They dragged them into the trees. We could still see the shadows. The rest of us just sat there. No one made a sound. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even move. In the morning, we got a bit of water, dirty water in a yellow jerrycan. No food, nothing else. I tried to talk to a few of the people in the cage, but they didn't respond. I spoke in Swahili, in English, even tried a little French. Nothing, just empty stares. I started to understand then that they thought I was one of them. Tutsi, and maybe to them I looked like one. I had sharp features, a thin face, a narrow nose. It didn't matter that I was Kenyan. In their eyes, I belonged in that cage. The second night, the same thing happened. They came back, chose 5 more, took them into the bush. This time, I couldn't look away. I watched everything. The way they moved, the way the men laughed, how they didn't hesitate. By the 3rd day, I was losing hope. My throat was dry, my hands were swollen from the tight ropes, and my legs had started to cramp. I didn't know how long they'd keep doing it. 5 a night until none of us were left. That morning, a new man was thrown into the cage. He sat beside me, breathing hard. He had a cut above his eyebrow and dirt in his mouth. I looked at him and, like I'd done with everyone else, asked quietly in Swahili, "Unatoka wapi?" To my shock, he looked up, confused, but he responded. He spoke slowly, said he was from near Gisenyi and had worked with Tanzanian drivers before. He knew a bit of Swahili. Not perfect, but enough. I told him I was Kenyan, a driver, showed him my national ID. He stared at it for a while. I could tell he wasn't sure what to do, but he nodded. He didn't say much else that day. That night, when the guards came again, I thought that was it. They were going to choose me. My legs felt like water. My heart was racing, but they picked others. At some point in the early morning, before the sun came up, the man who spoke Swahili stood up and went to the edge of the cage. He whispered something to one of the guards. They argued. I couldn't hear what they were saying. Then the guard walked off. A few minutes later, 2 men came and opened the cage. They pointed at me. I thought they were taking me to die, but instead, they cut the ropes off my hands and led me out. I was shaking. I couldn't understand what was happening. The Swahili-speaking man was gone. One of the guards shoved my ID into my shirt pocket and handed me a plastic bag with my truck keys. He said something in a language I didn't understand and waved me off toward the road. My truck was still there, parked under a tree, engine cold. It hadn't been touched much. I climbed in with weak legs and sat there for a long time. I didn't start it right away. I just sat and stared at the steering wheel. My hands were shaking. My clothes were soaked in sweat and dirt. I had bruises on my arms and legs. My lips were cracked, but I was alive. I turned the ignition and drove. I didn't stop until I crossed into Burundi. I didn't eat until I got to Bujumbura, and even then, I barely tasted the food. I took a long bath and threw away the clothes I had worn. I called my employer and told him I wouldn't be finishing the delivery. He didn't ask questions. He just wired me enough money to get home. I crossed into Tanzania a few days later, took a different route through Mwanza, then down through Dodoma and Arusha. I didn't go near Rwanda again, not once. Even years later, when the genocide hit and the whole world saw what had happened, I didn't need the news to tell me. I had already seen the start of it. I still think about that man sometimes, the one who spoke Swahili. I never knew his name. I don't know what happened to him. Maybe he lied to the guards. Maybe he told them I was an international driver. Maybe he bribed someone. I'll never know, but he saved my life. I don't forget that. I still have that ID card, the same one I showed him. It's old now, corners torn, edges faded. But I keep it in my drawer, not because I need it, but because it reminds me of how close I came to disappearing, to becoming just another body in the woods, another story no one would have heard. I drive a box truck out in rural Kentucky, mostly hauling feed, fencing supplies, and sometimes equipment for farms tucked way out in the backwoods. It's a lonely kind of job, but I like the quiet. I've got my route memorized by now. Same stops, same long stretches of cracked two-lane roads lined with dying trees and rusting mailboxes. Cell service is spotty at best. You wave at everyone whether you know them or not. I keep a cooler full of drinks in the back seat, a knife on the dash, and a tire thumper behind my seat. That's just how it is out here. You never know when you'll need to clear a branch or deal with something more serious. Just today, something weird happened. I was about 15 minutes outside a town called Liberty. Barely even a town really, just a gas station, a diner, and a Dollar General. I was headed to a horse farm to drop off some salt blocks. It was about 8 in the morning, and the mist was still clinging low to the road, that kind of fog that makes everything look washed out and quiet. I come around a curve and see 2 black labs in the middle of the road. At first, I just thought maybe they were strays. Not uncommon, but they were going at it hard, teeth bared, snarling, tumbling over each other in the yellow line. I slowed down and crept up behind them, tapping the horn gently. That's when I saw what they were fighting over. One of them had a severed deer leg gripped in its mouth, and the other was trying like hell to rip it away. Not a fresh leg either. Fur all matted, the bones sticking out raw and dirty, like it had been out in the woods for a day or two. It was so out of place, so violent looking against the soft fog and quiet woods. I tapped the horn again, louder this time, and finally one of them took off into the ditch with the leg while the other chased after him. I didn't get out or anything, just watched them disappear into the trees. But it stuck with me, that image of 2 nearly identical dogs fighting like wild things over a piece of dead animal. Felt feral. A few weeks ago, I had another moment that gave me pause. I was making a delivery to a guy named Todd, a farmer with a huge spread of land. His driveway is long, almost a mile, all gravel and potholes, winding through thick trees that block out the sun even during the day. I'd been there before, but this time it was almost nightfall when I showed up. Late drop-off. I climbed up the last little hill just before you reach his barn, and I saw 3 owls sitting on the fence posts that line the entrance to his property. One on each of the posts, evenly spaced out like someone had set them there on purpose. It was dead quiet except for the crunch of gravel under my tires. When I got close enough, they all turned their heads toward me at the same time. My headlights caught their eyes just right, and they lit up like tiny lanterns. Yellow-white reflections that didn't blink, just stared. I'm not superstitious or anything, but there was something real unnatural about it. The way they just sat there, perfectly still, like they were watching me come in. I didn't stop or anything, just kept on to the barn, but I kept my window up even though it was warm out. After I dropped the feed, I came back out and they were gone. Not a feather in sight. The posts were empty like nothing had been there at all. It didn't scare me, exactly, but it left me unsettled the whole drive back down that long stretch of gravel. But if I had to pick the single creepiest thing I've seen on the job, it happened late last year, during one of my last runs before the holidays. I was driving through a place I won't name, just in case the folks involved are still around. It's not a big town, just a few trailers and rundown houses spaced way too far apart. I was on my way back from a drop, mostly empty, cruising around 40 down a long straight road flanked by dead fields and leaning power lines. It was about 10 at night. No streetlights out there, only the truck's headlights lighting the way. As I passed by one of the old houses I've always seen but never stopped at, I noticed a flicker in my side mirror. Just a little spark at first, near the side of the house. Thought maybe someone was burning trash. That's common out there. Then suddenly, flames shot up the side of the house. Fast. Too fast. It looked like someone had doused the place in gas or lighter fluid. The fire just rolled up the wall like it was made of paper. I slowed down and looked back fully in the mirror. The flames were already licking the roof, and smoke was pouring out of the windows. No fire truck in sight. No yelling. Just the fire and one guy standing out in the yard, not moving. I pulled off the road a little way down and watched for a minute, my heart thudding. I wasn't about to get involved unless I saw someone needed pulling out. But then, out of the front door, comes another man. Bigger. He had something in his hand. Looked like a piece of lumber or maybe a pipe. He ran straight at the guy standing in the yard and tackled him to the ground. They started going at it, rolling and punching. I could hear the thumps even over my engine. The fire just kept growing behind them, lighting everything up orange and red, casting giant shadows of the two men fighting. Eventually, the bigger guy pinned the other one down, landed a few more hard hits, and then got up and sprinted into the house, still burning. I thought he was done for, but after maybe a minute, he came back out dragging a hose. He put out the fire, not all at once, but enough to keep the place from completely burning down. Took him a long time, maybe 20 minutes. I watched the whole thing from my truck, heart racing, engine running in case I had to drive off. Later, I heard the story from another guy at a gas station. Turns out, the man who set the fire was the younger brother of the guy who owned the house. Meth head. He was trying to burn the place down for insurance money or out of some twisted grudge. No one died, but the older brother beat him up pretty bad and sat on him until the sheriff came. They had to tear the back part of the house down after all the damage. That night stuck with me more than anything else. It wasn't the fire or the fighting. It was that moment of seeing the flames start and grow, with no sirens, no help coming, no one around. Just two men in the middle of nowhere and a fire eating away at what little they had. I still think about what would have happened if the brother hadn't been home. The house would have burned to the ground, and maybe no one would have known why. Driving out here, you see a lot of things that don't make the news. Strange things, sad things, stuff that doesn't seem to bother anyone but sticks with you. Every once in a while, something really bad happens, and it just becomes part of the road. People drive by it like it's nothing, and maybe that's the scariest part, how fast it all becomes normal. The dogs fighting in the mist, the owls watching from the dark, the flames rising in your mirror and no one coming to stop it. You just keep driving, alone, wondering what else is out there waiting past the next bend. I've seen a lot out here on the road. Fistfights at truck stops, rookies sideswiping other trucks, old-timers arguing over CB radios like children. When you're out here long enough, things stop surprising you. You learn to expect nonsense in places that are already worn thin with tension, long hours, and too much caffeine. But nothing tops the day I stopped at a truck stop in Arizona, somewhere between Flagstaff and the California state line. That day was one for the books. Me and this co-driver had already been at each other's throats for most of the trip back. At first, we thought we could tolerate each other, split the driving hours, keep the wheels turning, and make good time. But within a few days, we both realized we were completely incompatible. He left trash everywhere, talked too much during my sleep hours, and couldn't back into a dock to save his life. By the time we hit Arizona, we were both fed up. We rolled into the truck stop around midnight. The lot was packed. Had to snake through rows of parked trucks just to get up to the fuel island. I waited what felt like forever before I finally got a spot. I pulled up, fueled, and told him I was going to take a dump and grab a drink. I was drained and starving. I wasn't in the mood for any more arguments. I just wanted a few minutes of peace in that disgusting truck stop bathroom. Inside, the tile was cracked, the air smelled like piss and fryer grease, and the drink cooler made a buzzing noise like a dying fly. I grabbed a couple of Gatorades, a sandwich that looked 3 days past its prime, and a small bag of beef jerky. Took my time in the restroom because honestly, I didn't want to go back to that cab. When I finally walked back to the truck, I noticed the sleeper curtain was open, and he was gone. Just vanished. No note, no heads up, just up and left. Fine by me, I thought. Gave me some quiet at least. I sat there for about 30, maybe 45 minutes. No sign of him, so I started doing some tidying up. There was this pile of trash he left from his last shift. Empty Red Bull cans, sandwich wrappers, even a half-eaten burrito in a plastic bag that stank like it had been cooking on the dash all afternoon. I'd had enough. I bagged everything up into 2 plastic bags, tied them off, and dropped them onto the floor by the passenger side. Eventually, he came sauntering back, looking like he just had a 3-course meal and a massage. He opened the passenger side door, saw the bags of trash, and without saying a word, just dumped them out onto the concrete right there at the pump. Didn't even blink. That was it for me. I lost it. I got out and tore into him. Not with fists, but with every curse word and insult I had in me. Told him he was a slob, a lazy piece of shit, and that I was done tolerating his garbage. Literally and figuratively. I didn't care if we were parked in front of a dozen other drivers waiting to fuel. I picked up the bags, walked the 20 feet to the trash cans, and slammed them in. There were 2 cans side by side, empty. It would have taken him all of 10 seconds to do what I just did. When I got back to the truck, I sat in the driver's seat, still fuming, and started filling out my logbook. I looked up at the mirror, trying to cool off, when I noticed 2 drivers about 3 trucks down from me. They were standing face to face, arms flapping like they were warming up for a boxing match. You could feel the tension even from that distance. I kept watching. One of them lunged, then the other, and suddenly fists were flying. But it wasn't a clean fight. They were missing more than they were landing. Swinging wild, stumbling over their own boots. One of them, a heavy-set guy in a sleeveless shirt, picked up a full metal trash can and hurled it like a shot put. It nailed the other guy square in the face. The lid flew off and paper towels exploded everywhere. Looked like someone detonated a confetti bomb at a janitor's funeral. By this point, I was halfway out of the truck. I wasn't going to jump in and stop it. I've learned better than to get involved. But hell, I wasn't going to miss the show either. I started walking over and noticed just about every other driver on the line had the same idea. A whole crowd started forming, half of them holding coffees or Gatorades, some with phones out, everyone watching. The guy who took the trash can to the face staggered back to his rig, opened a side compartment, and pulled out this massive chain with a padlock hooked on the end. It looked like something you'd anchor a boat with. He came stomping back like a man on a mission. No hesitation, just pure rage. He started swinging the thing like a medieval flail. First, he took out the trash canner's fuel pump hose, then shattered the driver's side window, then the side mirror. He dragged that chain down the fender and left a foot-long gouge that probably went through the paint, the metal, and half the man's soul. The whole time, he was roaring like an animal. The trash can guy ran to the other side of the pump and grabbed the only thing within reach, a squeegee. He tried to fight back with that, swinging it like a sword, but all it did was spray water on the chain guy's chest, and that just made him angrier. Now it looked like some demented sword fight with a chain and a windshield washer going at it like it was Thunderdome. Eventually, after a few minutes of this madness, they both realized their weapons were doing more damage to the trucks than to each other. So they dropped everything, lunged at each other, and just bear hugged like two bulls in a pen. They dropped to the ground in this awkward tangle, rolling around, kicking at each other's shins like toddlers fighting over a toy. Their legs were flailing, arms wrapped around each other, red faces pressed together. It was one of the dumbest, most ridiculous fights I'd ever seen. I shook my head and walked back inside the truck stop. Behind the counter was a woman in her 50s. Looked like she'd been working truck stops since the 80s. I told her there was a fight out on the fuel line. She didn't ask for details. She just dropped what she was doing and marched out there like a school principal heading to the playground. I stood near the doorway and watched as she stormed into the middle of that chaos and somehow got them to break apart. She didn't yell, didn't touch them, just stood there, hands on hips, glaring. And like magic, they stopped. Later, I heard from another driver that the whole thing started because one of the guys supposedly said something to the other guy's wife. From what I was told, she walked up and started throwing words first, and the guy she was yelling at said something back. Maybe sarcastic, maybe rude. Either way, it snowballed into this whole mess. Between the broken window, the trashed fuel pump, the gouged up fender, and the bruises both of them took home, I imagine it cost each of them a few $1,000s and a good chunk of pride. I got back in the truck, still shaking my head, and got us rolling west. My co-driver didn't say a word after that. He must have known he pushed the last button. We made it to California without another incident, but the partnership was over. I dropped him off at a terminal and never saw him again. Not that I ever wanted to. There's a weird kind of lawlessness that brews in truck stops late at night. Long hours, hot tempers, poor hygiene, and too much time in a confined space. It creates the perfect storm. I don't follow FedEx trucks anymore either. Used to be fun riding with them, hammering down I-40 at 75 miles per hour, running two-truck drag races in the dead of night. But those days are mostly gone. They slowed down, or maybe I just stopped caring. Out here, the stories never stop. You think you've seen it all, then something like a trash can to the face and a chain fight reminds you, nah, the road's still got more to show.